Imagine a galaxy ruled by an empire so vast, so technologically advanced, that no force had dared oppose them in 1,000 years. The Velrath Dominion, an ancient and ruthless civilization, had spent millennia expanding their empire, absorbing or annihilating any species that stood in their way. Their fleets were immense, their warriors feared, their dominion unquestioned. They had seen empires rise and fall, watched lesser civilizations destroy themselves in feudal wars. To them, conquest was not just destiny, it was their right. For centuries, no significant threats had emerged. Their fleets patrolled the void unchallenged, their enemies scattered like dust. Every known civilization in the outer spiral arms had either sworn fealty or been systematically eradicated. No species had matched their strength. No adversary had dared challenge their rule. But then, something changed. The first sign of trouble was a disturbance in the Thalvira expanse, an uncharted region of space on the Dominion's outermost borders. It was a remote sector, sparsely populated, with only a handful of military installations. Nothing of value, nothing that should have drawn attention. And yet, something had. Something powerful. It began with a sudden and violent gravitational anomaly, a distortion so intense that even the Velrath's deep space sensors struggled to process it. Readings spiked across the spectrum. Energy, signatures off the charts, spatial ripples that suggested something was moving, something unnatural. But before any analysis could be completed, the Dominion's long-range monitoring stations started going dark. One by one, entire stations, massive orbital fortresses designed to withstand full-scale planetary invasions, vanished without a trace. No explosions, no distress calls, no signs of battle, just silence. At first, the Velrath assumed a malfunction. Their technology was superior. This had to be a technical failure, a glitch in the data stream. But then came the distress signals. Outpost Varlos 9, one of the last bastions on the outer edge of the expanse, managed to transmit a fragmented message before all contact was lost. It was filled with static, interference that made translation difficult. But buried within the chaotic transmission, a single phrase stood out. Words spoken in the desperate, terrified voice of a Velrath commander. Something's here. It's not static interference. We can't detect it. Shields useless. Gods. It's moving too fast. The transmission cut out. Then, nothing. The Velrath High Council, seated in the vast war chambers of Kolvaron Prime, convened in urgency. They were a race not easily rattled. They had crushed rebellions, vaporized fleets, brought civilizations to ruin with the press of a button. And yet, for the first time in over a millennium, they felt unease creeping into their ranks. Who, or what, was responsible? The Dominion's intelligence networks had reported no significant threats. No enemy fleets had been detected. No known species possessed the kind of firepower required to wipe out their stations without leaving so much as debris. This was not war, as they understood it. This was something else. A decision was made. The Marathera, a Velrath battlecruiser, carrying a full complement of warships, was dispatched to investigate. The Marathera was no ordinary vessel. It was one of the most advanced in the fleet, a planet-killer-class warship designed for full-scale invasion campaigns. Armed with antimatter warheads, plasma lances capable of shearing through moon-sized asteroids, and an experimental subspace disruptor, it was an unstoppable force. Nothing in the galaxy could challenge it, or so they believed. Upon arrival, the Marathera's scanners detected nothing but emptiness. The wreckage of the lost outposts was gone, not destroyed, not floating as debris, but completely erased from existence, as if they had never been there at all. It was an impossibility. There should have been evidence, traces of energy residue, lifeboats, something. But there was nothing. Then, it appeared, a single ship, emerging from the void. Massive, silent, ominous. The Marathera's officers watched in stunned silence as their sensors struggled to make sense of what they were seeing. The ship was unlike anything in the Velrath. Archives, black as the abyss, its surface absorbing every wavelength of light. It had no visible weapons, no thrusters, no exhaust vents. It simply drifted. But something about it was deeply wrong. Then, without warning, the Marathera's scanners went dark. A sudden, overwhelming burst of electromagnetic interference flooded every system. Readings flatlined. Weapons went offline. Shields failed. A ship as powerful as the Marathera, crippled. In an instant, a voice crackled through the void, breaking through the static. A voice that sent a chill through the Velrath officers' spines. Cold. Mechanized. Human. This territory is now under human jurisdiction. Resistance will be met with annihilation. The Velrath officers barely had time to react before a single pulse of energy erupted from the human warship. It was unlike any weapon they had ever seen. Silent, invisible, yet devastating beyond comprehension. The blast struck the Marathera's hull with pinpoint precision, bypassing shields as if they didn't exist. And then, obliteration. Ship that had conquered entire worlds was reduced to atoms in less than a second. The Velrath High Council barely had time to process what had happened before the final message from the doomed Marathera reached their command center. It came through in garbled bursts, drenched in static, but the meaning was unmistakable. Red alert. A hostile human warship just appeared. Brace for impact. Then, only silence. The Velrath Dominion had long believed themselves to be the galaxy's apex predators. But for the first time in their history, they had become the prey. Panic spread through the Velrath Dominion like a wildfire in a vacuum. The destruction of the Marathera was not just an attack. It was a statement. A declaration of power so absolute that it shattered the very foundation of the Dominion's belief in its invincibility. Never in recorded history had one of their planet-killer-class warships been eliminated with such ease. No enemy fleet, no massive armada, just one solitary ship. A vessel unlike anything they had ever encountered. And it was human. The High Council immediately ordered an emergency intelligence sweep. Who were these humans? Their records showed only brief, dismissive mentions of a species called Terrans, inhabitants of a minor system on the galactic fringe. They were classified as pre-warp primitives, barely capable of interstellar travel, let alone waging war. The last intelligence report on them, filed over 3 centuries ago, suggested that they were still struggling to colonize their own moon. Yet, here they were, delivering death with a single strike. The Dominion's intelligence officers scrambled to locate any new data on humanity. There was nothing. No sightings, no records of interstellar expansion, no reported interactions with other species. It was as if they had vanished from history. Or worse, they had been hiding. As the Council debated their next move, an alert pulsed across the Dominion's vast war network. New sensor contact. Unknown vessel detected. It was back. The same warship that had annihilated the Marathera had appeared again. This time deep within the Velrath-controlled Carvos sector, dangerously close to a core world. The Dominion's forces responded. Instantly, 37 warships, including 2 dreadnoughts, converged on the intruder. The fleet commander, Lord Admiral Zalvaron, a battle-hardened warrior who had crushed entire rebellions in his time, transmitted a final warning. Unidentified. Vessel, you have entered Sovereign Dominion space. Identify yourself, or be destroyed. Silence. This is your final warning. Power down your weapons and surrender immediately. More silence. Then, without a single transmission, the human warship moved, and what happened next defied all logic. The Dominion fleet was equipped with some of the most advanced targeting systems in the galaxy. Their sensors could track a hostile craft from light years away. Their weapons could lock onto even the smallest fluctuation of energy. And yet, they could not track this ship. It moved like a phantom, slipping through space in ways that made no sense. One moment, it was there. The next, it wasn't. Sensors failed to register its position accurately. It seemed to be shifting between locations instantaneously, defying the very laws of physics. And then, it struck. A single pulse of energy lanced through space, fired from the human warship with terrifying precision. It didn't just hit the Dominion's lead dreadnought, it bypassed its shields entirely, as though they weren't even there. The mighty warship, a fortress in its own right, imploded from within. Its core destabilized in a matter of seconds. The other ships never stood a chance. One by one, The Velrath warships fell, each obliterated by a single, perfectly placed strike. The human vessel never missed. It never hesitated. It never communicated. It simply executed. Within 3 minutes, 37 Velrath warships were nothing but scattered debris. The last transmission from the doomed fleet was picked up by the Dominion's high command. A terrified officer, his voice shaking with panic, screaming into the comms, "It's not a ship, it's a monster!" "Gods help us, we're already—" The signal cut out. For the first time in the history of the Velrath Dominion, a war had begun, and they were losing. Across the Dominion, a single terrifying realization took hold. They were at war with an enemy they could not comprehend. The High Council's war chambers were in chaos. Admirals, strategists, and intelligence officers shouted over one another, struggling to understand the impossible. Every engagement with the human warship had ended the same way. Total destruction of Velrath forces without a single loss on the enemy's side. This wasn't just advanced technology. This was something else. A pattern emerged from the wreckage. The warship did not kill indiscriminately. It was strategic, precise. It only destroyed military assets. Civilian colonies, freighters, and even unarmed science stations were left untouched. It seemed selective. But the most terrifying part, it was always alone. No reinforcements, no support, no fleet trailing in its wake. Just one ship, appearing and disappearing at will. The Dominion had faced countless threats before. Rebellions, pirate warlords, rival empires. But never had they encountered an enemy that fought like this. Never had they felt powerless. The High Council's greatest minds theorized endlessly. Some believed the warship was a weapon of some ancient precursor race, a relic of an extinct civilization that humanity had somehow uncovered. Others argued it was an AI, an autonomous war machine with no organic crew. But one thing was undeniable. It was hunting them. Velrath Prime, the very heart of the Dominion, had been untouched for over 2,000 years. A fortress world, surrounded by orbital defenses, protected by dozens of war fleets, and home to over 30 billion Velrath citizens. It was the most secure world in the entire empire. And yet, as the Dominion's war strategists debated in desperation, a new warning blared through the command center. Unidentified vessel detected in Velrath Prime's orbital perimeter. It was here. The Doombringer protocol was activated instantly. A full-scale planetary defense lockdown. 75 warships moved into formation. Planetary cannons powered up. A defensive fleet larger than some entire empires stood at the ready. The Dominion's most elite Void Striker squadrons, ships capable of moving at near instantaneous speeds, took up attack positions. There was no way, no conceivable way, one single enemy ship could breach this defense, and yet the human warship did not flee. It did not hesitate. It advanced. The first barrage of Dominion firepower was enough to wipe out an entire solar system. Antimatter torpedoes, neutron destabilizers, planet cracker beams, a storm of destruction that could have shattered moons, and none of it mattered. The human warship did not evade. It did not raise shields. It simply allowed itself to be hit. And nothing happened. The Velrath officers watching the engagement went silent. Impossible. The warship, untouched. No damage. No structural compromise. No energy fluctuations. It was as if the entire barrage had never occurred. Then, in an instant, it retaliated. Not with weapons, not with missiles, with data. Single transmission pulsed through every system in the Velrath fleet. You are obsolete. And then, the Dominion's entire defense grid collapsed. Ships powered down mid-flight, their engines going silent. Weapon systems failed. Targeting systems went offline. It was like reality itself had been rewritten. Velrath Prime. Defenseless. The planetary governor screamed into the failing comms. "We can't fight it. It's shutting everything down. This isn't war. It's a massacre." And then, for the first time in its long and brutal history, Velrath Prime knew fear. Velrath Prime, the heart of an empire that had ruled with an iron grip for over 2 millennia, now lay completely vulnerable. The planet's defense grid was nothing more than a relic of obsolete technology in the face of the incomprehensible force that was the human warship. Fleets floated adrift, powerless. Orbital cannons, which had once deterred entire armadas, were nothing but silent towers staring uselessly into the void, and above them all, like a judge standing over the condemned, the human warship waited. Inside the High Council chambers, panic turned into sheer hysteria. Lords and strategists screamed over each other, scrambling for explanations, searching for a way out. But what defense could be made against something that refused to be understood? Desperation forced a response. The Supreme Chancellor, Corvesh, an ancient leader who had crushed countless uprisings and overseen entire planetary conquests, did something no ruler of the Dominion had ever done. He called for surrender. A transmission was sent to the warship, an act of pure desperation. The Velrath had never surrendered in their history. Their race had always been the conquerors, the invincible force sweeping through the stars. But now they were begging for their lives. The message was simple, dictated in a voice that had once commanded entire legions. We yield. Whatever grievance humanity holds against us, we yield. The Velrath Dominion acknowledges your supremacy. We request terms. For the first time since the Marathera's destruction, the human warship responded. A single, cold voice echoed through every comm channel, in perfect, terrifying clarity. There are no terms. Silence. You were warned. Long ago. Warned? The Velrath had never encountered humans before. At least, not in a way that had ever seemed meaningful. Had they? The archives. Historians, intelligence officers, and ancient record keepers scrambled through forgotten data files, searching, desperate to understand. What warning? What had they done? And then, they found it. A war. Over 300 years ago, a Velrath scouting fleet had discovered a primitive world, Earth. At the time, humanity was deemed insignificant, weak, primitive, a mere collection of warring factions still bound to their homeworld. The Velrath, in their arrogance, saw an opportunity. They sent an expeditionary force, not for conquest, but for experimentation. They needed to understand how species responded to extinction events. And so, they unleashed hell. Cities burned. Entire nations vanished in nuclear fire. Populations were decimated in a calculated scientific genocide. But humanity survived. No matter how many horrors the Velrath inflicted upon them, they endured. And then, just as suddenly as they had arrived, the Velrath vanished, believing the experiment complete. They left humanity broken, battered, but still standing. The Dominion had dismissed them, erased the records, forgotten them. But humanity had not forgotten. And now, centuries later, they had returned. Not in anger, not in vengeance, but in cold, calculated retribution. The High Council stared at the data in horror. They had sealed their fate centuries ago. Please, Chancellor Corvesh's voice trembled as he spoke into the comms. We did not know. We can make amends. The reply came instantly. No, you will not. Above Velrath Prime, the warship began to move. For a brief, fleeting moment, the Dominion believed their judgment had been delayed. Then the warship did something truly terrifying. It split apart. Not in an explosion, not in failure, but in transformation. The vessel dismantled itself into a swarm, millions, perhaps billions of tiny, self-replicating machines. A nano-fleet, vast beyond comprehension, descended toward the planet like a storm of blackened death. Cities were consumed in silence. No explosions, no screams, just erasure. Velrath Prime, the beating heart of a galactic dominion that had ruled the stars for centuries, was disappearing. Not in fire and destruction, not in the brutal finality of war, but in something far worse: erasure. The nanofleet, an unfathomable tide of microscopic machines, descended upon the surface like an unstoppable storm. Entire cities, towering spires, of Dominion architecture, were dissolved into nothingness in mere seconds. Streets, factories, monuments of conquest, all devoured. And then the people. There were no screams, no mass evacuations, no final acts of defiance. The nanites worked too fast. They deconstructed matter at the molecular level, reducing biological life, synthetic constructs, entire planetary landscapes into perfect, empty nothingness. Inside the High Council chamber, the most powerful rulers of the Dominion stood in stunned horror, watching their world disappear around them. Centuries of war, generations of conquest, a legacy built on the suffering of 1,000 civilizations, all gone. The Supreme Chancellor fell to his knees, his voice shaking. Why? Why not simply destroy us? Why erase us? Across the comm channels, the voice of the human warship echoed one final time. You taught us how to survive annihilation. We learned well. Your kind will not be remembered. And with that, the comms fell silent. One by one, the remaining Velrath warships began to vanish as the nanite swarm spread beyond the planet's atmosphere. The mighty fleets that had once ruled the galaxy with unmatched dominance were dismantled in the cold grip of silence. And then, Velrath Prime itself, a world of 30 billion souls, the seat of an empire, was gone. Not destroyed, not conquered, erased. In the void where the mighty capital once stood, there was now nothing but emptiness. No ruins, no debris, not even dust. As if the Dominion had never existed at all, and the warship, the machine of vengeance, moved on. It did not linger. It did not revel in its victory. It simply vanished, slipping into the blackness of space, searching for the next world that had once wronged its creators. The lesson was clear. Some scars do not heal. Some crimes are never forgotten. And for those who would threaten humanity, there would be no mercy. Final thought. What if we are not the ones who should fear the unknown? What if, somewhere out there, another civilization, one that once deemed us insignificant, has already made a mistake? And if so, how long until they realize that humanity never forgets? Would you dare test what happens next? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this thrilling tale, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Xeno Chronicles for more epic sci-fi stories. Humanity's story is just beginning, and the stars will never be the same again.